Hare Krishna. Hello, everyone. This is our fifth class. We're picking up on, I think, chapter 4, verse 12, and hoping to finish the fourth chapter today. And great to be with all of you. Thanks so much for your contributions over the week at WhatsApp and for thinking about and applying about the philosophy in your lives. And as always, we'll start with a short kirtan from Kelly in Burlington. Hare Krishna.
Haribol. All right, Amy. Amy, you gotta sing really loud. No. All right, Haribol, sweet souls. Come into a comfortable seat. Maybe take a few breaths and just arrive here and settle after whatever you were doing today. And all you have to do after this, all you get to do after this. And we commit to this next 60 to 75 minutes to being here now, together, to immersing ourselves in transcendental knowledge, with sincerity, with enthusiasm, with devotion and love. Take a deep breath in through your nose, fill up. Open your mouth, exhale, let it go. Our opening prayers. Take a breath in. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshunamilitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda
Om Jnanatimirantasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to class 5. Hope everyone's well. Yeah, lots of reflections in the WhatsApp chat, lots of beautiful applications and thoughts on last class and things that have come up. So I'll just review myself a little bit of what came up, and I'd love to hear any remembrances of what you remembered from the last class or from your readings. We read from the 31st verse of the 3rd chapter till the end of the 3rd chapter, and into the first part of the chapter 4. We read the first 11 verses, chapter 4. So in the very first verse that we read, 331, we read a purport where Srila Prabhupada talks about, in elaborating on Krishna's original point, that if one accepts the principle that there's a supreme controller and that we can spiritualize our work by having it be an offering to them, and they're not resentful of that, even if they're not able to completely follow that perfectly in 100% purity or dedication of their time and life, just by accepting that principle and trying to apply in their life, they win. Actually, they make advancement gradually. And we talked about this point of gradual advancement, and that was one of the themes I saw in the reflections from the week, that more than a couple people pointed out this dynamic, that it's really refreshing and it's really encouraging that we're all wherever we're at, and we're individuals, and everyone has their practice, everyone has their specific karma, their specific challenges, their own set of realizations, and their own set of things that they're working on, and that's between them and their spiritual guides and Krishna ultimately. And it's always good, and it's accepted, and we're not meant to judge ourselves based on others, or judge them based on ourselves, and comparison is not really useful. And just that sincerity of being ready to see whatever's on my plate right now. What do I have to work on? Is it something that's supposedly like elementary, or is it more advanced? Or am I like, do I think I'm advanced, but actually I have so many of these elementary things I really want to, shore up? I mean, that's my realization from teaching the first 4 chapters of Bhagavad Gita now. Is like, wow, I've been practicing for a dozen years, but actually these things that I can quote chapter and verse on are still very fresh, and there's still so much for me to work on, and that's okay. So that came up for a lot of people, and just kind of feeling supported and giving ourselves permission to be individuals and be wherever we're at without judgment. And then there was the few verses from 35 to 39 about controlling the senses and regulation. We talked about regulating the senses, and how when one shouldn't come under the power of attachment or aversion to the objects of the senses, that there's these things we want or don't want. That's attachment and aversion. That's what the mind does. I want this, I don't want that. I like this, I don't like that. And that's going to be there as long as we have a material mind. And so we regulate, I gave the example of, cinnamon buns, I may like them or whatever, but I'll decide I'll have this many and no more. And so that way there's a regulation. And so that way we're not coming under the control of our attachment or aversion. Our likes and dislikes aren't running the show. Our spiritualized intelligence ideally is. And there was some beautiful verses in there about purifying the mind of selfish desire. This word kama, selfish desire, in its general sense came up, that like, even if I know what's good for me, Arjuna asked this question on everybody's behalf, how is that we're forced practically against our will? Atakena prayukto yam papam charati purusha. Anichan, he uses the word anichan, practically against my will, without even wanting it. I do things that are not good for me. What's the deal with that, Krishna? And Krishna describes that's called kama. That's your lower nature, and that's what we're trying to regulate. And it's there in the subtle body, it's there in the mind and the heart, as a result of our previous activities, and so many attachments and aversions are there. And some reflections came around that of like, well, I'm glad it's not just me. I thought there was something wrong with me. Well, I mean, that's kind of why we're all here. That's kind of what we're here to work through in general in life, in the greater sense of here. So that came up. And then we talked about parampara, this Sanskrit word. Krishna says, Evam parampara praptam imam raja shayo viduhu, beginning of the 4th chapter. In this way, I shared this knowledge in parampara. Parampara means one after the other. We share this knowledge one after the other. That is coming down. It's been recited. It's eternally true that we're connected to a spiritual source. It's eternally true that we can act in service or we can act according to our lower selfish nature. That's always been the case. That's why it's an eternal knowledge. And it's eternally refreshed. There's this point that came up that even the most beautiful thing in the world can become stale or disrespected or ignored or twisted or forgotten. Because that's the nature of the world. It can get covered up. You can clean your room and then it gets dusty again. So all the best things have to be refreshed, including spiritual knowledge. So Krishna says he shares this one after the other in parampara. And a question came up in the chat that was really nice. It's a question I remember asking when I was really new. Why is it that Arjuna is not in the parampara at the beginning of the book? Why is that not listed? And the answer is that one of the answers is that he is, but it's not a comprehensive list because there's no room for that. You can't even list 4 generations of your family without taking up like multiple pages, probably. And like, here's that person's dog, and here's, this person. And it's like, yeah. So this is a several thousand-year long span from, Krishna speaking 5,000 years ago to now, Srila Prabhupada. So it's impossible to list everybody, but it's just giving a sense of very important persons of different generations. So like Srila Prabhupada, he has so many God siblings who came from the same guru as him are all very advanced, but we're listing him because it's his special contribution to sharing Krishna consciousness around the world and translating and commenting on Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna is there in the broader sense, the broader scheme. And in another sense, also, so are all of you, because you're hearing with that openness and you're applying in your life to whatever extent. So that's also there. One after the other, it continues. And then we heard about Krishna's appearance and his reasons for appearing, to reestablish dharma, to reestablish progressive human life, and to regulate non-progressive, destructive tendencies, and the power of knowing about him. If you know about him personally, if you know about the nature of his activities and appearance, janma karma chame divyam, this word divya he refers to as an adjective. If you know the divya, the divine, that's where the word divine comes from divya in Sanskrit, the divine nature of my form, of my activities, my name, of myself. If you understand that, truly understand that, then you're done with this world. You're done with the place of struggling with your lower nature. You're done with the material attachments and detachments, and you come to me. That's the benefit of knowing him personally. And then we talked a little bit about, I think we just concluded with this verse, Yegetam Mam Prapadyante 4:11, that everyone is following my path in all respects. In one way or another, everyone's following my path. I am facilitating everything. If they want to be a little engaged in spiritual life, I'll let them have that. If they want to be really engaged, I'll let them have that. If they want to see my actual face, if they want to know me as a person, they can have that. If they want to ignore me, they can also have that. And I reciprocate with them personally, individually. Again, spiritual life is very, very individual, very, very much from the heart. And there's no meaningful comparison to be made between persons that way. Krishna's reciprocating with everyone in their relationship with him. Yeah, that's what I took away from all the reflections and what we talked about. I'd love to hear anything that came out for you. You can also just reiterate anything I just said, things that you were thinking or feeling, and just a reminder that reflection doesn't have to be like a long thing about like what's happening for you in your spiritual life. Just something that stood out for you that can kind of jog us. So don't feel shy if you don't have like a whole huge thing to present. Just anything that stood out for you from our readings. Leslie, please, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I heard in the last 6 months or something a nice spin on 4:11. As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. And it's it's a nice way to look at letting go of what you think other people should be doing. So it's like kind of the codependent, like let go. I don't have to worry about what my brother believes, what my husband believes. He's on the path. my brother's on the path, my husband's on the path. And so it's, that has brought me a lot of peace, even with, people that are not in my circle that, I'm trying to practice tolerance, and, that person's on the path, and I've been, I've had lots of behaviors that could be, in need of tolerance as well. So, I appreciate that verse.
Thank you.
Going on it. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the dynamics that can come up is if we can judge ourselves. Another one is we can judge others, or be in anxiety around results. Like, when will this person, step up to the plate and take their spiritual life more seriously, or do this or do that? And at the end of the day, Krishna is facilitating everybody's spiritual practice and spiritual realizations. And as he's trying to point out to Arjuna, he's not giving a one-time shot here. It's not that, okay, one life, that's it. You get some knowledge if you're lucky. If not, do the best you can, and that's all you get. It's actually much more broad-minded than that. And the context is, of course, Arjuna is really in dismay about the impending war. And Krishna is putting into context for him that, okay, I get that. It's good that you have a heart and you care about these people. But real care means involving yourself in seeing their eternal journey, their long-term journey. Take a step back, take a look from a higher perspective. And that's what I heard in your comment, Leslie, is that from the higher perspective, from Krishna's perspective, from the top down, all of our struggles or being apparently frozen in a thing, or really challenged by something, it's just a blip. We're going to go through it, and there's a way in which Krishna is in all those situations, even the ones that are less than ideal, and we can relinquish control and be like, okay, he's got it, he's taking care of it. I love that, because the part of me that wants to be in control all the time is getting purified by that knowledge all the time. Actually, I can't. Circle of influence, circle of concern, we talked about. So yeah, thanks. Any other reflections from the last week of reading and discussing things in your practice, things that came up in the early fourth chapter, late third chapter, or anything that anyone else said that stood out to you?
Haribol.
Haribol.
We have some things to say.
Great.
Amy first.
What I remember just that I put in a note here is you said something about we've forgotten our soul, and when we forget our soul, we become so attached to all the material stuff. And I find that as I reconnect to my soul, I feel like I'm letting go of my senses more.
As you reconnect to your spiritual self, your soul, you naturally become detached from the senses. Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what Krishna said in the second chapter. That parang drushva nivartate, when you experience a higher taste, then you let go of the lower taste. The example I like to give is like, anybody here ever had a child, taken care of a child, been around children? Even I don't have children, but I have like young cousins and stuff. It's like, this is a universal experience practically, right? If there's a child and you're taking care of them and they're like latching onto something, right? Like they grab my cell phone, and imagine it's something more dangerous than that. It's like, maybe it's going to hurt them. Maybe it's sharp. If you take it out of their hand and you forbid them and that's all you do, if they're smart enough and they're strong enough, that does not solve the problem. They'll just find it again, right? Because they don't have anything else to do. Now, the mind is very powerful. It's more powerful than the average child, very persistent. And so just telling, I'm not going to do that, I don't want to do that, I'm going to be detached from the senses, that doesn't work. What you have to do is you have to give them something better to play with, because they want to play. That's the nature of children. They want to fiddle. So you take the knife out of their hand, you take the thing that could hurt them, and you give them a toy. And they don't know the difference, but you do. So what we're doing in our lives, this lifestyle management process of the bhakti yogi, lifestyle management means putting ourselves in a position to recognize ourself, our soul, through hearing, through sangha, through prasada, spiritual food, through these bhakti processes, and then naturally we'll become detached. This is how bhakti is at the core of the recovery or getting over addictions or purifying the mind thing, instead of just attacking the mind in a negative way, we attach it in a positive way to something higher, and it lets go of the lower things, right? Another example I give is when I'm traveling, I I know that when I'm in an airplane, there's like not much to do there, and I'm kind of like stuck, and there's no fresh air, and I can't see the great outdoors. So I like to have some nice, delicious food. So I pack I pack my favorite food, and I'll offer it to Krishna and have it be like first class, spiritually and materially delicious food. And so when the flight attendants come and they're like, "Hey, would you like some of our nonsense?" I'm like, "No, I'm good." But if I didn't have my container of beautiful, like imagine your favorite foods, you or someone you love has offered it to Krishna with so much love and packed it to the brim, you're never going to say yes to the flight attendant has to offer you. Like, no, I'm good. I'm totally fine. But if you don't have that, you're like, maybe, I guess nonsense is better than nothing. And next thing you know, you're digging in. So it's this higher taste. We're getting a higher taste. Thank you for that. Beautiful.
Thank you, Shamya. Yeah, what I was going to reflect back is builds off of what you were saying, or is related to what you're saying. You began class last week talking about how, based on a question someone asked, how you can't opt out of life, like you can't opt out of material life, and that rather changing the motivation of our actions, and how can we be of service in our actions and offer back to gratitude and back in gratitude and in devotion, how that purifies like our karmic processes, which then also can help develop that higher taste, like Amy and you were talking about there. But I really appreciated that, as I just people in my world, and even in my own life, I'm hearing recently just like sort of some disparity, or like just struggling with the challenges that are happening in our life. And such a good reminder that you can, like check out, but you can't really opt out of life. And our spiritual practice really provides a shelter for us, which is the verse that I wanted to point out, verse 4:10. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's one of my favorite purports in the Bhagavad Gita. I already gave one of my other favorite ones in 331. I think what I'd like to do is look at that purport a little bit, because we may not be able to explore it all right now, but I encourage any of you who are introspective about your obstacles and your blocks internally. This is a very psychologically relevant purport. It's very real. So in the Sanskrit, I'll share the screen here so you can see. This is 4:10 Bhagavad Gita. Vitaragapaya kruta manmayamam upashutaha bahavognan tapasa bhuta madbhavamagataha. Krishna gives these three things: being freed from attachment, fear, and anger. Being absorbed in him, taking refuge in him, by the knowledge of him, they become transcendental. And so in the purport, Prabhupada talks about how these three things can manifest. Attachment means, let's see how he talks about it here. Yeah, so he talks about fear. That, one second, I'm just going to get these stuff out of the way so I can read it myself. That because of having difficulties in one's life, because of relationships being a problem, people keep in mind the same bodily idea when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. In other words, fear means fear of a personal existence. That because when I hear that Krishna is a person, above an all-pervading truth, there's actually a personal reciprocation. There's a person there. There can be some fear around that, because my experience with relationships is being let down. My experience with relationships is at the end. My experience with relationships is that I'm misunderstood, or I don't get the benefit of the doubt, or this or that, And so there's a fear. There's actually like a fear of a personal existence. And so this is one of the obstacles we're trying to overcome. Anger, another one is mentioned in the verse. Prabhupada talks about that too. He says here, bit of a long purport. Yeah, here it is. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all, being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation. They become disgusted or angry and conclude there is no supreme cause and everything is void. It's like if you hear so much contradiction, if there are people who are not practicing what they preach, if there are atrocities committed in the name of God, in the name of spirituality, you're like, I'm so fed up with this that there can't be any spiritual truth. It's almost like if your parents let you down and your teachers let you down and your politicians let you down, you don't trust authority anymore. You're just angry. So spiritually speaking, this can happen for us too. So I don't trust that there could be spiritual truth because my sources of spiritual truth have let me down, or there are so many contradictions, or people who won't answer my questions, or won't take me seriously, or whatever. And the response is internally one of resistance, one of anger. So this purport has a lot there about overcoming attachment to the world, anger, and fear as obstacles to actually receiving Krishna as a spiritual supreme person. So there's a lot there, and it's kind of a thing that aspiring, spiritual practitioners can look at in themselves and under guidance kind of see, like, am I actually like afraid of surrender? Am I afraid of opening myself up to Krishna because of this thing in my life or that thing? Or am I attached to the world because I'm kind of addicted to like material enjoyment, or am I angry and fed up? How's that affecting my bhakti process, my process of spiritualizing my activities, of surrendering bit by bit? So lots there in purport to 410. Thanks for bringing that up. I wasn't planning to go there, but it's just one of my favorite purports, and there's a lot I think that people can take away.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. All right. So let's continue. I think I'm hopeful we can get through the rest of chapter 4, but whether we do or don't, we'll have a lot of fun. And so continuing, the next section, Krishna says, everyone follows my path in all respects. I'm reciprocating with everybody. So then he says that he's created a system, the Varnashrama system, the material system for everyone to progressively make advancement if they plug into it. So there's a way in which, like, if you don't do anything else, you don't actively like try to progress spiritually. If you're just like a civilized human being, you take responsibility for your family and things like that, and you're a good citizen and a good, son or daughter, then those kinds of things purify you too. And they help you come to a point of asking more and more deeper questions. So Krishna is talking in 413 about the system of plugging into the world according to your kind of work and doing your duty, and how that helps you become purified gradually. But then he goes into more about transcendental knowledge, how transcendental knowledge is the result of spiritualizing your work, of doing your work in service. We talked about this in the 3rd chapter discussions, that anybody who's tried to spiritualize an activity, anybody who's tried to offer their food, for example, or do something like, I think they gave the example of like Melanie goes and does this flower service for the Mahaprabhu deity, at the Bhakti house. And by doing that, by that action and service, she experienced that her understanding moved from the theoretical to like feeling in her heart and knowing a little more the truth of what Krishna is saying in different ways. And that's true for everybody, that we all have these experiences of doing things in service gives transcendental knowledge, right? So that's a lot of what this chapter is about. So Krishna talks about the apparent contradiction between action and inaction, that sometimes what appears to be action is actually inaction. In other words, what appears to be someone doing something and accruing karma and being like entangled in the world is actually completely disengaged, completely unentangled. Why? Because it's dedicated. And then similarly, one who looks like they're completely free and detached, like Arjuna's idea of leaving the whole battlefield. Oh, how advanced, how spiritual he is. He's beyond all these things. No, that would actually be very attached, because it's just for his comfort. It's just to feel better about the thing. It's just because he can't face the challenge of doing a service that could put him in a position where he might have to see a situation that he's not comfortable with his own family. That's actually entangling. That's actually binding. So that comes up. And in verse 24, there's a beautiful truth that comes out here, that, as it says in the Sanskrit, share the screen with you here. 424. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagna Brahmanahutam Brahmaivatena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samatina. That bit of a wordy translation, I'll break it down for you. Somebody who is absorbed in Krishna consciousness, they become transcendental, they attain the spiritual kingdom. Why? Because everything, what they do, the result of what they do, the substance itself becomes spiritualized. That's why the repetition of the word Brahma is here. Brahma means the spiritual, the great. When you use your body in service, your body becomes spiritualized. One can feel like the difference in their body between like acting for their own senses versus acting out of service. Like, I think Justin was giving the example in his comments in the WhatsApp thread of like cutting wood and doing physical activity in a mode of service, and how he feels very, very purified by that. The body gets purified. The place gets purified. If you ever go to a place that's where a lot of spiritual activity has or is taking place, it feels different. It's purified. The time gets purified. Other people, your relationships with them get purified. Anything you use in spiritual life and a mode of service gets purified. A substance itself too. The classic example is again with food. If you take the same food and you eat it selfishly versus if you offer it with simple devotion, the quality of that eating and that food, it's the same chemical composition. The quality of it becomes different in a very subtle way. So there's this beautiful way in which Krishna is breaking down that whatever we do, however we do it, wherever we do it, whenever we do it, as long as it's done in service, creates this progressive spiritualization of the circumstances. And then there's a series of verses from 25 to about 33 about something called yagya. Anybody ever heard the word yagya before, the Sanskrit word yagya? Yeah, I see a couple nods. Yagya means sacrifice. Basically means sacrifice. It's also a word for the Lord. It's a word for the Supreme in Sanskrit. It's a synonym. But sacrifice, which tells you something, is sacrifice is ultimately meant for the Supreme. Now in this section here, Krishna is talking about different kinds of sacrifices. So in the 26th verse, Shrotadin indriyani anye sagdimani shujufati shubdadin vishayan anya indriyagni shujufati. That, for example, if one is in the world and they're engaging with the objects of the senses, they spiritualize those objects of the senses. They sacrifice those sense objects in the fire of yagya. Their money, their body, their food. If they're less in the world, they're more like a renunciate, a monk. They're engaged in the hearing process more. They're hearing Bhagavad Gita, scripture, mantras, they're chanting more. Then they're sacrificing the hearing process. Shabda means to hear. The hearing process is part of their yagya. Actually, in this age, the main form of yagya for everybody includes a certain amount of hearing, as much as possible. Hearing and chanting of Krishna's name, especially the Hare Krishna mantra, and these core texts like Bhagavad Gita is good for everyone. There's no monks in this room. There's one former monk over here, and there's no current monks. But everybody's hearing. Everyone's getting together on Tuesday and hearing. So Shabda, this hearing process, is the sacrifice, because you could be hearing anything. You could tune into CNN. You could tune into the ideas of your mind. You could tune into the television and YouTube, but you're hearing the sound vibration from Krishna. You're hearing his names. You're hearing the philosophy around him. That Shabda, that sacrifice of sound, is a kind of yagya. It's a kind of sacrifice that purifies one. He also talks about sacrificing in terms of meditation, the eightfold mystic path, the Ashtanga path of yoga. And we've heard this word Ashtanga before. I know Kelly has. I guess all of us have, pretty much. Ashta. Ashta means 8. Ashta, octo, in Latin, Ashta. 8 anga, limbs or aspects. 8-limbed path, eightfold path of yoga. Controlling the senses, the do's and don'ts, your breathing, how you sit, all these things. Ultimately, dhyana, dharana, meditation, samadhi, full fixity of concentration. This is the mystic yoga path. And some people are very qualified for that. That was more true in previous ages where we had the ability to be like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to live in the mountains now and just like for the next rest of my life, really practice strict meditation, celibacy, total detachment from society. As an exclusive process, it's not so much going to get you there in the absence of hearing and chanting. It's a good supplement though, and very good for the body and for purifying the mind. And it's a kind of proclivity. Some people like to learn how to sit still and still the mind. And in fact, in my experience, many people who come to bhakti or come to hearing about Bhagavad Gita or end up in classes like this or take up a bhakti process, they've already done some work around this. They've already like been curious about like, okay, what's meditation? How do I can I try sitting still? And maybe someone in their life taught them about meditation and being quiet and peaceful and focusing on nothing, hearing the mind and not reacting to it, and being the observer. Any people, show of hands, already had some experience with that? Yeah, basically everybody. This is a kind of yajna. You're sacrificing the urge to kind of flicker around and not focus, just sitting still. It's a kind of yajna. There's also the jnana yajna. There's the yajna of knowledge. There's the yajna, the sacrifice of cultivating spiritual knowledge, of actually hearing from Bhagavad Gita, and spiritual texts, spiritual sources, that we can learn anything. We can learn languages. We can learn chemistry. We can learn carpentry. We can learn so many things with this beautiful mind of ours in the human form of life. We have such capacity, such intellect. And what we choose to do with that is one of the fundamental assets we have, resources. What you do with your time, what you do with your money, what you do with your attention, what you do with your relationships, what you do with your knowledge. These are like the basic things we have as humans. So jnana yajna, the sacrifice of learning. Krishna says some people like to learn and they'll study. And in some orders of life, that's all you do. Like as a student monk, I read for hours a day. And I loved it. As I said, I love that. That's really right up my alley. So I'm not a monk anymore, but I'm still teaching and reading about Bhagavad Gita a lot because it's my kind of thing. But everybody benefits from that kind of yajna. And so Krishna is saying a beautiful thing here. He talks about these kinds of sacrifices, sacrificing possessions, severe austerities, studying the Vedas, celibacy, controlling the breath, yoga. Text 32. This is worth taking a look at. 432. Even Bahuvidha yajna. Bahuvidha means multi-branch. Bahu means many. All these different kinds of yajna. Vitata brahmano mukhe karmajan vittisan sarvan. Evam jnatva vimokshase. Vimokshase. You get liberated. All these different types of sacrifice are approved by the Vedas. All of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such will be liberated. Because people are so absorbed in the bodily concept, these sacrifices are arranged that one can work either with the body, the mind, or intelligence, ultimately bringing liberation from the body. That we have our different proclivities. Not everyone is going to be inclined to read for hours a day. That's okay. Maybe you want to work with your body more, that's all right. Maybe you want to get into the Ashtanga system and supplement your yoga practice with that. That's great. But ultimately, the goal, as it says here, is this Gyan Yoga, this transcendental knowledge. This is the fruit. If you're performing sacrifice properly, you get this transcendental knowledge. In fact, it's in the previous verse, without sacrifice, you can't live happily in this world. This is one of the two happiness formulas in Bhagavad Gita. The next one is in the next chapter, 529. This is for 31. Yeah. Without sacrifice, you can't be happy in this world. Think about that. What's it like being selfish? What's it like thinking the world revolves around your satisfaction? It's deeply unhappy. It's a deeply unhappy situation because guess what? The world doesn't revolve around my satisfaction. And if I really, absolutely think it does, I can't be happy until I let go of that and start sacrificing. That's what we're made for. People feel better when they give. It's their nature. And this comes out in a few purports that even if you don't know about a supreme, even if you're not convinced about a supreme, even if you're not sure, you think you are the body, even if these things are like, not clear to you, everyone knows from experience in life, it makes us happier to give than to get. It makes us happier to sacrifice short-term for long-term. This is the principle that underlies bhakti too. That beyond like being honest and clean and waking up early and truthful and law-abiding and faithful and all these things that are, pious and civilized, beyond like giving to society and giving and being charitable and caring about others. If one starts to turn that attention, that giving propensity, that propensity to sacrifice my lower nature for a higher thing, if one turns that all the way up to the highest frequency, all the way to the supreme, then you're looking at bhakti. You're actually into the stratosphere of bhakti. And at lower vibrations, it's also seen in like how we take care of each other. How even like very selfish people will at least have a few people around them they care about. Even like warlords and like criminals will have a family often, right? And they'll kill for that family. This is an aspect of the self reflected in different situations. We can't be happy without sacrifice. I see a lot of nods around that. It's like a very, very tangible, truth. So what does that mean in the context of Bhagavad Gita? It means that the 33rd verse says, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions, because all sacrifice of work culminates in transcendental knowledge. It's like, let's say I'm a very charitable person. I give away lots of money, but I don't think about what I'm doing with it. I don't think about how it helps people. I just know that it's a good thing to do. Am I getting benefit from doing that? Yeah, because I'm giving away my money. Let's say it's to a good cause. I get whatever benefit is accorded. Either good karma, if it's like a karmic cause, or if it's like, even I give to like spiritual causes, I get some benefit from that. Now imagine I give knowing exactly what I'm doing and how much help it renders to other people. And I'm conscious of that. And it matters to me. How much more of a difference that makes, right? It's like the difference between doing the right thing accidentally or for the wrong reasons and doing it on purpose. All of your sacrifices in your life, intentional or unintentional, of your money, your time, of your energy, of your intelligence, of everything, they give realizations. We're here to learn. Life is a journey of learning. We're meant to take in lessons. That's what Krishna is saying here. All of your sacrifices culminate in knowledge. And that culmination of knowledge in Bhagavad Gita he's sharing is that I'm with you. There is a spiritual reality and I'm with you. You're part and parcel of me. That's the culmination of spiritual knowledge. So are there any let's just actually finish this chapter, then we'll take reflections. Everyone doing okay so far? I'm not going too fast. Makes sense? Any comment? Anything you want me to pause on right now, or we're good? Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. So sacrifices of work, of substance, of the external are meant to create internal shift. We're meant to like actually come to a point of knowing in my heart that something's true. Even the sacrifice of knowledge. Like if I read a book, if I read Bhagavad Gita, there's so much truth there, but I'm getting like some percentage of that. By doing something in relationship to what Bhagavad Gita is offering, in relationship to the bhakti process, the karma yoga process, I actually start to know in my heart the truth of what's happening more. Just like, we've been giving the example over and over again. When someone does something externally, they feel the truth of the message internally more. Krishna is saying the same thing here. The knowledge is the fruit of what you did. That's actually the result. That means that you're doing it right. You can see the truth. You can see the truth of what's being talked about to you because you try to apply it in your life. And then there's a beautiful verse, one of the most important verses of the Bhagavad Gita, 434. It's kind of a shortcut. If you want transcendental knowledge, what's the fastest way? Tadviti pranipatena pariprashnena sivaya upadekshanti te jnana jnaninas tattvadarshanaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from them submissively and render service unto them. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. The nature of that is talked about in the purport, what it looks like, how it doesn't mean you can't ask questions. In fact, in the verse, pariprashnena means to ask all around, to completely ask around subject, like ask intelligent questions. That's part of it. But approaching somebody who knows and receiving from them is the most practical way to make advancement in spiritual life. How do we know that? I think the easiest way to know that is to look at material life. I gave the example in a previous class if I want to know about, I think it was occupational therapy. If I show up to the world's greatest occupational therapist talking about his or her craft, science, if I'm serious and sincere, I could know nothing going in and get some really good tidbits, you know? That's the whole principle behind TED Talks. It's like, let's get the world's greatest minds, experts in their field, and let's sit around and really listen to what they have to say. And you get benefit. That's what education is all about, is being receptive. We've talked about this over and over again. And it comes up here in the 4th chapter that if you find people who are living their life according to Bhagavad Gita, if you find people who are living their life according to what you want to be doing, who have more experience than you, who are willing to help you, who are like-minded, and you hear from them, you inquire from them, you submit to them, you get so much benefit. And that's what we're doing here too. We're hearing from Srila Prabhupada, you know, we're hearing from people who are more advanced in the practice of bhakti, and we're getting benefit. Just like if I want to learn about anything in life, it would be crazy not to take the benefit of an expert, somebody who's experienced. It would make no sense to avoid doing that. So Krishna is saying, this is the principle of guru, of the teacher. Try to find somebody who's living according to these principles. Yeah. And so the chapter ends by talking about what happens if you have transcendental knowledge, how you don't fall into illusion again, and that you see all living beings as part of the Supreme. In the very next verse, from the one where he says, take shelter of spiritual teachers, is when you do this, he says, you won't fall into illusion, because by that knowledge that you get, you'll see all living beings as part of the Supreme, or in other words, as he says, in other words, that they are mine. One kind of metric of spiritual advancement is that we start to see living beings as part and parcel of a supreme spiritual reality. We actually can see the unifying aspect of all living entities, that they're coming from a source. So we can see, like, in all traditions, spiritually advanced people, no matter whether they're speaking in this language or the language of Bhagavad Gita or en français, en espagnol, it doesn't matter what part of the world, how old they are, what their gender is, what age in history it was. They're always respectful of life. They're always non-sectarian, because they see everyone is connected to the Supreme Source anyway. They're always beyond the differences in the body. And Krishna is talking about that. You see how everyone is part and parcel of me, right? These are some of the aspects of transcendental knowledge. How it purifies one of ignorance, burns to ashes all the reactions of material activities, how it creates spiritual peace. You know, there's a lot of question around, like, how do I be happy or have peace? And one answer so far is do sacrifice. One of the reasons is you get transcendental knowledge, and you can't be happy without knowledge. If you don't know where you're going, you don't know the results of what you're doing, you're not sure why you're here, you don't know who you are, you don't have a sense of purpose, you can't really be happy. But when those things start to get filled in, then the heart is satisfied. We all know that, because we all have some degree of that. Actually, everyone in this room has a degree of transcendental knowledge, and therefore a degree of spiritual peace that cannot be taken away, no matter how much it rains or the market crashes or my health crashes. Peace that's on a different level, right? So that's there. And so he concludes the chapter as saying, so therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Nice analogy. Knowledge is like a weapon. Ignorance or doubt is like bondage. You cut that knot. Cut that knot that's tying you up with that sword, that weapon of knowledge. So stand up and fight. That's what I'm asking you to do, Arjuna. And that's the 4th chapter, transcendental knowledge. Hare Krishna. I'd love to hear any reflections. anything that you have questions on that we just reviewed, comments. If you've read ahead of this section already, you want to talk about anything you see, please. Reflections. It's 7:25. Reflection means anything that stood out. So, for example, if you heard that you can't be happy without sacrifice, and that stood out to you, you can be like, yeah, I heard that. I think that's interesting. That's enough for a reflection. It could be one sentence. So let's get one reflection. One thing that stood out. Now,
One of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking, I love how you really broke down yoga. I thought that was really helpful for me. One of the things that like I think about a lot, and it's I don't know what you can give all sorts of advice around this, but I feel like I try to spend, and I don't try to, but I tend to spend a lot of time in sadhana in the morning because it's just
sadhana means spiritual practice for those who,
and like this morning I was reading for like an hour and I realized what time it was and I was like, oh my goodness, I have to get going for work and all the things I have to do. And sometimes what happens for me, it's like I would rather be like giving in my sadhana, in my practice, than like going to the actual like responsibilities of my life. And so then it's like it's such a balance, but also it's like when I go to do the things, like I'm thinking about like I would rather get back home so I can do more chanting, or I can go back home so I can like be in my temple of a house. How do you balance that when like the real world stuff doesn't stop, and also you like I don't know if I'm articulating myself very well, but
I think so.
Yeah.
How do you balance that, and what do you do about it in those situations of, because like, you know, I'm hearing like for you at your level of practice, your experience is that sometimes you wish you could just sit there and chant and read, and it's just so sweet, and it's like, oh my God, I got to take care of things. I can relate to that, you know. I mean, if I wanted to, I could have just stayed a monk and just done that, you know, and it would have been easier to just in many ways to do that. But I have full conviction that one can be engaged externally in the world too and have it be bhakti. I see it in my own teachers, and I'm seeing it in my life now. One of the answers I would give, not the only answer, is that when you're in your practice and you're like, oh wow, I only have time to read for an hour or something today, and that's what I did, but I want to do more. That's actually a gift. That's actually a giant gift. Think about it. Would you rather be somebody in a material environment who wants to be in a spiritual environment? Or would you rather be someone in a spiritual environment who wants to be in a material environment? Would you rather be in the world, thinking about Krishna, wanting him, and doing your services with that yearning? Or would you rather be with him and thinking about, wow, I wonder how the Red Sox did? You know, I could really go for a hot dog. You know, like, this is a gift. Actually, you're very fortunate. You're very fortunate because you're starting to develop desire. And everything moves from the subtle to the gross. I made this point earlier in another class. All the things in our life move from my heart to conscious thinking, to plan, to words, to action, to my life circumstances changing, my relationships changing, to, you know, I get a new job, or I live in a different house, or whatever the external thing is. So if you really want to be hearing more, and you're attached to that, and you're dutiful in your external life too, cherish the fact that you want to hear more, because that's going to carry you to a situation where you're going to have less responsibilities externally. You'll have done them, and Krishna will facilitate you special opportunities to hear more. You know, I was in the world. I owned an apartment. I had a job. I had a master's thesis I just finished. I was not a monk yet. This is 2013. And I had relationships with friends. I was like all of you, right? And I was also practicing bhakti, and I really liked hearing the books and stuff. And I had the opportunity to go on pilgrimage, and the circumstances in my life lined up. Notably, I did not abandon my duties to go on pilgrimage. I didn't say I didn't do anything irresponsible. My job contract had finished. I was like not in a relationship with a woman at the time. The timing was really good. And I got the chance to spend a whole month just hearing for like hours a day in an ashram situation, go on pilgrimage and see holy places. And I got like a little injection of what it's possible. I couldn't do that every day. Even as a monk, I couldn't exactly do that every day, but I got a taste of what is possible. Just like, in our spiritual lives, you can have a day in a month where you can have like, this is my special day of like hearing more. Like this is like my off day and I'll just read for 3 hours or whatever, right? Whatever you really want. And those high water points, they give you a sense of what's possible when it's not those times. And that experience of doing that for me really changed my heart, actually. And I would say was instrumental in me becoming like a teacher of these books and reading more and, becoming a monk and then not a monk, but still like teaching Bhagavad Gita. And so who knows what shape it'll take for you or anyone else listening to this, but rest assured that it's not a bad thing that you want these things. It's actually a very good thing. You always want to be in a situation where your desire is greater than your capacity. You always want that because then your capacity is always going to increase because you're asking for it. You're asking for your capacity to increase. You're actually internally praying for that because you're feeling like, I love this. I want more of it. I want to understand it. I want to apply it. And the best thing you can do is use that time you have effectively, however much time you have. In fact, at the very highest levels of spiritual emotion, there are several symptoms of what's called bhava. Bhava means the onset of deep spiritual emotion where one is actually beginning to fall in love with God, fall in love with the Supreme, become overwhelmed with this personal connection. Very high thing, very esoteric thing. But the practical aspects of it are that one symptom is somebody at that level never wastes any time. They hate wasting time. Somebody who's like spiritually advanced, you put them in like a bank line that's just going so slowly, they'll pull out a Bhagavad Gita and read it. They'll pull out their phone and start chanting mantras off of it. They'll chant Hare Krishna. They'll like think about the latest thing they read. They'll, write a text message to a devotee. You're like, they'll be engaged. They're not going to waste time. So if you use the time you have effectively, efficiently, and you cultivate like that efficiency and seriousness with it, Krishna will give you more time. And you're getting a powerful life skill because efficiency and the desire to not waste time is found at the highest levels of spiritual life. So those are some thoughts, but it's a huge topic and I know it's going to come up again and I'll probably say something different next time, but I hope that's a good start for you.
Prabhu, the two things I wanted to point out, I feel like also could be beneficial in thinking about Melanie's question and your reply of you said that doing things in service gives transcendental knowledge, right? So it is a service also hearing and reading, but then to go out in the world,
Yes,
do your work and do your responsibilities, Mel, or for each of us, right? That's also service. So then more understanding will come, right, when you're reading.
yeah. Particularly if it's done in a mode of consciously seeing it as service. Like I had someone reach out to me today, last week, about the same thing, that they feel like this division in their life between the job they have, that the job they have doesn't feel like it's in line with their spiritual integrity and their deepest values, and they have to do it. They circumstantially, like I could never tell them like, just don't do this job. That's what they have to do right now, and they would rather be doing a different kind of job. So how to spiritualize that, and the art and science of that is part of what Kelly's saying, is that when you can do these duties as a service and see how you're doing it to give and not just to get, I'm going to work to give myself and my children and others, my dependents, the opportunity to practice spiritual life. I'm giving that. Then it's actually part of your service, even if it's not what you'd rather be doing. Arjuna would rather not go to war, but he had to do it because it was important. And it was a service, 100%. And so it's possible for him to spiritualize that service, and it's possible for me to spiritualize my job and your job and their job. And so, yeah, definitely. There's a relationship between hearing and doing also. When you hear a lot and you get all this theory, it's beautiful and purifying. You can feel how it cleanses your heart. But then you go and you practice that in your life. You try to apply it in your relationships. You try to apply it with how you deal with your money, your body, your spouse, your partner, your children, your world, your neighbor, your job, right? All these like things that, oh, that's just like the other stuff that doesn't matter. No, that matters. You know, it's definitely like, it's a place for you to apply all these things. And when you do that, talked about in the previous class, the relationship between theory and practice, that you hear and you practice, and then your practice gives you realization, and you go back and you hear more, then you reapply with whatever you have. Then it's this ongoing cycle. So yeah, especially for us in this age, we can't hear forever. We have to do things externally. But if we're just running around, we're not hearing, it also becomes, it degenerates, right? The Japanese have an expression, thought without action is a dream. Action without thought is a nightmare, right? So they're connected. Arjuna doesn't sit down at the end of Bhagavad Gita and be like, I'm cool, I get it, I'm good. Like he goes to war, like he exerts himself, right? A lot of action, he sweats. So, but it's bhakti. It's actually transcendental action. So encouragement is to be found in that, I think. Thank you, Kelly.
Can I say two other quick little things?
Yeah.
The other two things you said, one that went with this is sacrifices in the external are meant to create an internal shift. It's another example of the sacrifice of not getting to do what you want to do, but going out and doing what you need to do.
Right.
And how that will shift your heart. And then I really loved how you said that the culmination of spiritual knowledge is to understand I am with you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very deep thing to accept, not just accept intellectually, but to feel and experience the relationship with the Supreme as a person. It's a very deep thing. And it comes in time. It's what Bhagavad Gita is aiming at, and all the levels coming up to that. It's helping us. One other thing that came up as you were saying about how the externals they're meant to lead to the internals. I was thinking about like religion in the conventional sense of the word, and faith. And one of the kind of talking points around faith or spirituality is that it's really very much about the externals for a lot of people. Like, I belong to this sect, this belief system, and it's like there's a certain kind of yajna that comes with like a sacrifice that comes into like identifying with the thing and doing the externals of it. But no matter what you belong to or what you name it you're operating under, you have to come to that internal realization. The heart has to change. So, and that's what people need too. We see that people's objection to spirituality has to do with objections to the externals. Like, always. They're not really objections to the internals, because when you yourself experience your own nature as transcendental to your body, when you experience other people as coming from a divine source, that's not objectionable. There's no problem in that. That's not sectarian. That's not limiting. That's the opposite of all that. All that stuff is found on the external level, on the human level, on the selfish level. So all the external things we do, the sectarian things we do, the rituals and vows and all that stuff is meant to create a shift internally. And if it doesn't, if we're not taking that internal shift seriously, it becomes like an ism, any kind of ism, political or social or religious. It's external without the internal. All right. Anything else? 7:38. We can stop here. We can take any more reflections. How do you all feel about this? I see smiles. Feel good?
I'm just gonna say thank you. I mean, thanks everyone. But I love listening to you speak. You're such a good speaker.
Thank you. Yeah, it's from hearing.
Unlike me. I just babble. Yeah, and the way that you, I mean, I know everyone can agree with me. Just the way you put things is just so nuanced and wonderful. I could personally listen to you talk all day without any of my personal reflections. But I just want to thank you for that. I'm loving it.
Thank you. Well, when you share your reflections, you're giving me the same gift back, right? So
yes.
yeah, and as to your appreciation, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'll acknowledge that there's some potency in it, because it's coming from having seriously heard. It's coming from having seriously heard from persons who are self-realized and receiving that message. I'm trying to represent it in a faithful way, in a way that's without a personal agenda, in a way that's relevant to your and my, cultural context and time, place, and circumstance. And I guess it's working, so that's great. But all credit to the Bhagavad Gita and Srila Prabhupada and my teachers. The process really does work.
Jai. Yes,
Yeah.
and you can, I can tell that this is how you operate in the world, and it makes sense. So thank you. Keep it up.
I will. Thanks for the encouragement. In the chat, Kelly says same. And Leslie says same here. So grateful to be in the Sangha. I have to get ready for another meeting. My biggest takeaway right in this moment is 431 as one of the spiritual peace happiness formulas. 431, of course, is I almost remember the Sanskrit. Nayam lokosti yagnyasya kutonya kurusatama. That you can't be happy in this world without sacrifice. Yeah. Or the next world. You can't be happy in any situation without sacrifice. Beautiful little, in fact, even the Sanskrit is like, it's half as long as a regular verse. It's only 2 lines of English, of Sanskrit. So it's like a little sutra, a little like saying. You can just take it away, like, can't be happy without sacrifice. Got to give. Was it Bob Dylan saying you got to serve somebody, right? That's the whole point. You got to serve, got to give. Okay. Wow. A lot of reflections for today's class. I think many of us were watching from online after the fact, but we had a lot of activity and dynamic thought and reflection. So thank you for that. And I had a great time. I hope you did too. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So for this week, please read the rest of chapter 4, at least the verses. And in the next 48 hours, just give any reflection. Again, reflection is just meant to be like a bite-sized thing. It doesn't have to be a whole long thing, because that can be like, not everyone has that much to share. It can be kind of like scary if there's like huge blocks of text. You can send those privately or to your spiritual mentors and stuff. That's valuable and good, but don't feel afraid to just send like a sentence about anything that stood out in the reflections in WhatsApp. And yeah, we'll start on chapter 5 next week. See you on the WhatsApp thread, and I'll send the link for this class. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Haribol, everybody. Love you.
Haribol.